Hello, everybody, and welcome to SkepTalk on the Lion Channel. It is April 24th, 2023, and our lines are open. We are inviting you guys to call in and have a chat with myself and my co-host, who you will meet in a moment. The number to call is 720-619-2288, or you can call using your computer using the link in the description. Just make sure that you have earbuds in, please, if you are calling. Just a reminder that we will be reading super chats at the end of taking all the calls. Any super chats over $5 or more, we will read at the end of the show. So if you send it and it's not being read right away, hang out until the end. We will read it if it's $5 or more. And today I am joined by Paul from Paulogia. Hi, Paul. Say hello to the people.
Hello,
everybody,
Shannon. Hello, and to all people. I'm Paul, and I have a YouTube channel. Actually, I have two YouTube channels named Paulogia. Subscribe to both of them if you like, or see how I do. No pressure. But
you better do good. People know that I know you. Don't mess up. Fuck this up, Paul.
This is true.
Don't embarrass me. No pressure, though. I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be okay.
Yes. That's asking a lot, but okay. Yes,
I know it is. I know. I'm aware. We don't have any calls on the line right now, so I want to know what kind of calls you're. Yeah, that'll come. That'll happen. People are just getting amped up. My theory is that everybody's so terrified because you and I together would be so formidable that they're all cowering in fear, knowing that if they call in about something like the soul or morality or the New Testament or the resurrection, that like we've got all the bases covered between the two of us, and there's nothing they can do, and they're terrified. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. Everyone's afraid. No, I'd love to chat with people, but we don't need to be hostile. We'd love to listen. We're open. I think we both would call ourselves non-resistant, non-believers if we could be convinced. If the right evidence came along, so hey, bring that evidence. Let's talk God, shall we?
Are you planting seeds for some divine hiddenness calls? Is that what that was right there?
I'm hoping. Yeah, exactly. It's on my mind these days. So.
Pick that up. Why are you on like a divine hiddenness kick these days? What is it about it? I don't think we've had this conversation.
Sometimes
we've had conversations about divine hiddenness.
I think what was happening was that leading up to Easter, all the apologists were just pumping out their resurrection, their like proofs of resurrection video after proof of resurrection video. And even though I didn't cover all those, and I've learned to bank them so I can spread them out throughout the year.
Yeah.
I think I'm a little bit oversaturated leading up to Easter about resurrection type stuff. And my mind kind of shifted to divine hiddenness. And so that's just, I don't know, a slight topic refresh. And it reminds me like that when someone asks what I think is the best evidence against Christianity. And actually, I think that is partly what led to it. I had a conversation recently with Dr. Kurt Jaros, who some may know as an associate of Mike Licona. That has not aired yet, so I'm not sure exactly when that will be going live. But in that, he was pressing me on what I thought some of the best evidence against Christianity was. And of course, for me, even though it's not evidence for anyone else, much like if you got internal confirmation of Christianity from the Holy Spirit, that's evidence for you, but not for anyone else. For me, divine hiddenness is enough evidence for me to say that the Christian God doesn't exist in the way that I'm the only person who can adequately evaluate whether I am a non-resistant non-believer, of the type that would foil a Romans 1:20 proclamation, for example. So, yeah, that's kind of why I was using that. Those
so you think it's kind of like
phrases.
One of the. So you think it's one of kind of like the best objections from your perspective when it comes to deconversion? You'd say that's fair.
I would say so. So a lot of people say, well, you can't prove that there's no such thing as a God, and of course that's the follow up to that is, well, it depends on the God, and of course, like I think I would agree. I have no way to disprove a deity who created the universe but stepped away and doesn't care and has no desire to interact, right? Like, how would we possibly disprove a disinterested God, for example? That seems like it there's no falsification criteria there. But on a specifically on the Christian God, it's that all-knowing and all-loving combo. Some people go after some of the other combinations of like all benevolent and all-powerful with the thing of evil, but it's just more like if there really is a God who wants to have a relationship with me, seems like he could. If I'm not resisting it, right? And that is the claim of the Christianity, is that there's a personal deity who, more than anything in the universe, wants to have a relationship with me. And so it seems like it would be able to clear that first barrier, which is the intellectual hurdle. I think most Christians would agree that there's at least 2 steps to salvation, even though they disagree with what they are. The first one is some level of intellectual assent.
Yeah.
And the second step is some sort of emotional response to that intellectual assent. Usually they'll agree to that category of 2-step process, but it's impossible to make that second step without the first step hurdle or cleared.
Well, I hope at least calls
but definitely call, and like maybe your view of salvation is different and doesn't require the intellectual assent step. That would be interesting.
What I want somebody to call, but I always love calls about like morality and the soul and stuff like that. But recently, you did a video, and you know what I'm probably going to say. I did a video blurb, like it was just basically 2 minutes of stream of consciousness, because you did a debate with Dr. Jonathan McClatchy, and as part of that debate during the super chat segment, like miracles were brought up, and the miracle that's brought up that all apologists seem to bring up is this Barbara woman who said that her MS got cured. And people in the audience may not know, but I have multiple sclerosis. And so I just did kind of like a stream of consciousness why I think that Christians need to just stop it with the throwing these miracle cure prayer things at people who have chronic and debilitating illnesses, as though that would be a reason for deconversion, or as though it's a good apologetic. And my God, I have been in a lot of debates that are contentious. Like, people call me to screech about abortion all the time, and about feminism, and about LGBTQIA rights, all of that stuff. Somebody wrote a whole ass article on Patheos, specifically basically telling me why I was wrong about how I feel about how Christians use miracles in their apologetics. So I'd like one, and the comment section was bananas, and my DMs were bananas, and I was like, wow. And I was actually anxious going into it, because as somebody who's constantly being inundated with, as a public atheist, with multiple sclerosis, as soon as Christians find out I have MS, one of the first things they do is they just barrage me with Barbara's story and how she had this miracle, and how, if you convert, maybe God will do this for you, and maybe this is your sign. Maybe me sending you this article for the 400th time is a sign that your incurable disease can somehow be cured with prayer. And they just started doing it again. And I was like, it's like you didn't even fucking hear me. It's like you didn't even hear me. You guys need to stop. Like, that's not a nice thing to do. Right? I know that you may even have the best of intentions, but it's a horrible thing to do. The message you're essentially sending is that, if you were a different person than you are, you wouldn't be afflicted with this. If you were like me, there's a better chance than not that you would no longer be afflicted with this. So isn't that reason that you should be like me? And they don't see the problem with that, and it's infuriating to me. So I kind of
for those who didn't see it, as we kind of described it here, but it wasn't an attempt to debunk the miracle. It was literally just Shannon, as presumably the greatest expert on earth about her own feelings, presumably.
Some days, I don't know.
Was just letting people know how she felt about it. I guess my question, I've been wondering, if I were to later go and do more of a debunking video, if I was to do that, how would you feel about me doing a debunking video?
Fine. Okay. I'd be happy it was on record, really, to be honest, so that I didn't have to go through the mental work of doing it myself, because I've contemplated it. But we've had this conversation, but the pressure affiliated with being perfect on it when you're somebody who has the affliction, because then you get inundated, right? You get inundated as somebody with the affliction if it's not perfect. But by everybody who's looking to poke holes because they want to hold on, not only hold on to that as a miracle claim that affirms their belief, but be able to use it in their apologetics with people like me because they see that as an arrow in their quiver. So it would just make that happen to me more, right? Like I was already taking a risk doing this, which has been parsed out because like there's articles being friggin' written about it.
I know, right?
So obviously like that wasn't an unfounded fear. So I'd be psyched. Like just do a good job. Do a good job. It would be my only advice. Right. Like don't do it if you don't think that you can put together the information well.
Gotcha. Well, I don't want to, obviously wouldn't want to reopen wounds, so we'll talk about that. But okay, so it's on the table if I can pull that together. That's cool.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's for sure on the table. If you do a good job, which I know you do, you always do a good job of stuff. You're very fastidious when it comes to making sure that all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. Plus, you live in a house with me, and I am somebody to be feared. So I know you wouldn't want. No, you wouldn't want to live that life. I'm sure.
This reminds me of a video that I haven't even shared with you yet that came out a couple of days ago about why I was wrong about my own feelings about whether I just left Christianity because I wanted to sin. So someone had made an original video, Apologia just wants to sin, and I responded to it. And the person was like, no, Apologia is wrong about his own feelings. It's just, that's the way.
You did send it to me. I was watching it on the deck. Don't you remember? Because I was sitting out on the deck and you were in the dining room and I gave you the finger because it was so bad. I was like, why do you always do this shit? I was having a perfectly fine afternoon and now it's ruined. Okay, well, we have calls on the line. Yeah, we do. Right. We are going to take calls. Don't forget, like if you send a super chat call and I will answer it.
Other times then.
You can send super chats to ask us about our domestic disputes and then we can fight after we're done taking calls because that's what we're here for. We'll talk to Ricky first. Hello, Ricky. You were on the line. What would you like to talk about today?
I'd like to talk about an interpretation of God and Christ, not as things that are separate or that happened years ago, but something that is happening right now within our consciousness, both as part of as individuals and on a collective level. And what I want to say about let's say where Christianity shines is when it's all an allegory for our consciousness, that God, whose name is Yahweh, is I am, and God is therefore the nothing more than the I am. Whatever you're experiencing, that I am happy, I am sad, I am depressed, I am going, in your case, through multiple sclerosis, that is God right there. And God is our best. It is us at our best. It is our love. It is our experiences, and it is also our imagination.
I think that borders from a biblical perspective on heretical because it ignores a lot of things too. So the Bible says a lot more than just I am. Like it's a strange thing to me to just focus on one set of words in a multi-page document and say that that's what it was attempting to encapsulate when that could have been done in just a sentence or a paragraph, and then that would have been the end of it. It would have been done. So just saying I am like that's not transmissible to me as something that is relatable. And I also heard you relate it to all of our good experiences specifically, which means that you're probably having some sort of like emotional connection to the concept, rather than it being founded in, the actual reality of consciousness and what self-experience is like. That would be my feedback. It doesn't seem founded in anything aside from, some sort of conceptual speculation. Can you give me something better than that? Like more than that? Can you say what that's founded on?
Are you still there,
Ricky? He's still registering us on the line. Maybe you muted yourself, Ricky. Ricky. While Ricky's figuring out a sound, do you have anything to contribute, Paul?
Well, I guess I'm curious as to whether he feels like this is a biblical perspective, like his interpretation of the Bible, versus that he would just like to give a label to the positive aspects of his life, and he's choosing just plucking out of the air Yahweh, much like one might name their child. It's like, well, my child is a lot of positive things, and I've plucked a name out of the air to give to my child, just as a label, because of course the Bible defines God not just as I am. That's what God calls himself, but the Bible is very clear that before the world began, I was is part of those I am passages, and I will always be. And of course, if you're limiting God to the finite set, first of all, of the individual, that's very finite, but even humanity itself, you can't just say that God is our positive experiences of humanity when he claims for himself that he was the Alpha and the Omega, and that he was the creator of these things. So our positive, I don't know, it feels incompatible with all the data. But if you just want to use God as a positive label, like it's kind of like the people who, just as God is the universe or God is love or whatever, well, then you're just, creating a synonym for those words. And it's not that interesting to me.
Yeah, it doesn't really inform anything either. And like, what would you need the Bible for at that point? Ricky has apparently gone. He has hung up. So we will. I think that's probably as much as we were going to be able to contribute to that anyway. I'm not sure. Maybe Ricky will call back and we can continue to have a conversation. But before we do, I just want to let you.
So I was excited.
I know. I saw your mouth go a little sideways when he said consciousness. What you may not know, everyone, is that Paul's favorite thing is when somebody calls me about consciousness. It makes him very happy. Actually, no. What Paul's favorite thing is watching me lose my mind. That's what Paul's favorite thing. Am I wrong? Yeah. See what you're.
You're not, so yeah. About the topic about which you lose your mind is sort of a secondary thing. I know that is one of the hot buttons. So that that or Christian counseling. There's a whole list of things that I know will make Shannon just.
I really do hate Christian counseling.
It's one of my great delights. So
This specific asshole on the screen here bought me that I didn't ask for this, for the record, a subscription to a Christian counseling TV show and sent it to our TV in the living room and then came out and said, I got you a present. Like he knew it wasn't going to piss me off. Just to let you know what my life is facts. Like. I don't know why they let us host this together. Patreon! Hi, everybody. We're on a show. We're very professional. We have a Patreon, so if you would like to support all of the fine work that we are doing on this channel, you can do so at patreon.com/call the line. And we actually have some pretty awesome shows coming up this week. We have today, Apologia and myself. Tomorrow on Hostility, we're going to have Jimmy Snow and Apostasy, who has like one of the best handles ever. I love that handle. On Wednesday, on The Hang Up, we have Matt Dillahunty and Dave Tomeo. And on Thursday, on the Transatlantic Call-In Show, we have Josie Caballero. I'm so sorry, Josie, if I pronounced your name wrong. And Ben. Dr. Ben. And on Sunday, on the Sunday show, as always, it's Jimmy and Matt. So you guys should check out the rest of the stuff we've got going on the line. Paul, are you ready to? We've got more calls coming in. So are you ready to take another one?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Cool. Let's have a chat with Rosie. Hi, Rosie. You're on the line. What would you like to talk about today?
Hey, guys.
Hi.
I'm coming in kind of unprepared because I just got home from work and
That's
I just put on.
We're not prepared either, like so this works out well.
Awesome. That sounds great. So I just had this general question for you guys as atheists. Have you guys ever had like an honest discussion with a Christian where they are responding honestly also? Because I get the feeling usually that you guys, when you come on, you guys are presenting your most honest selves and your perspectives on atheism. But the Christian side seems to always kind of stop short of even just basic consideration. Like, as atheists, we're kind of asked to consider, what if this God exists? What if the resurrection happened, etc. But, you ask a Christian, like, what if there is no God? And they'll like short circuit and I don't know, think like it's some kind of they probably think it's a sin to consider that God doesn't exist. But it's kind of hard to have a real honest discussion with anyone if they won't even consider your perspective.
Well, I agree with that. I think that's true. It's hard to have an honest discussion with anybody who won't consider your perspective. Paul, go ahead. I saw your mouth open. Go for it.
Well, I guess for me, I'm sensing in whatever answer I would want to give, I would want to make a difference between honesty, like straight up being truthful, versus intellectual honesty, which maybe is where you're drawing a line, because intellectually honest, we can, of course, lie to ourselves, right? And we can selectively not think about certain things if we don't want to, or we can straight out not consider other people's perspective on things. Those are all things we can do, which are maybe not intellectually honest. But if we were conveying them, we would still be being honest that is our current, view on something, or that is our opinion, or that is how we feel. So, like, is that a meaningful distinction to you?
I had to unmute you. Sorry, Rosie, you were having some background noise, so I muted you while Paul was talking. You're unmuted now.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that is actually a very good distinction, because so much of Christianity is based on feeling, and if you can't even get beyond that feeling to intellectually consider all these different aspects of your own religion, then it can't really go anywhere, I think.
I think it's also a bit like a firmly entrenched identity too. Like, it's not just what you think about something, it's to a certain degree who you are. And when something is so tied to your identity, it's very difficult. Like, you're consistently attempting to reconcile, because it's not just, that you found out a new fact about something mundane. If you find out a new or contradictory fact about something that you see as like an inherent part of yourself, like, that has additional repercussions. So you're invested in retention to a degree that's not the same for other aspects of things that you believe.
When I was a Christian, I definitely would have said all these things that apologists would have said, and I would have been incredibly genuine about them. So, like, it wasn't that many years ago that I can remember doing that. So, again, if I can introspect it all about myself, I can know that I was well-meaning about it. But also, I think both Shannon and I would say, I deal with apologists a lot. I watch them all day long. Ascribing motive, I don't find to be a particularly helpful activity, because it's actually more helpful if I just take them at their word. Like, if they're being dishonest about what they're presenting, that's kind of on them, and it almost doesn't matter to my response whether they are being honest or not honest. I'm just having the conversation that I'm in right now, and I kind of have to take them at their word. And if they're being duplicitous about something, so be it. I still have to, for the sake of the audience, or for the sake around me, address the points as best I can. So that's kind of how I deal with that. I don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah. Does that resonate with you at all?
It does. It really does. Yeah, I'm very curious all the time about how you guys approach the callers, and because I know you guys do this a lot, so it must, when you guys explode, like, I also have a really good time when Shannon goes crazy, but I imagine that, like, every time it happens is like frustrating, and it takes a lot out of you, and but I mean, in general, people in general, like, as an atheist, to have to, like, constantly constantly be basically your best, present your best self, and engage regardless of what is coming back at you.
Yeah, like it can be difficult because I always want to put my best foot forward, but I definitely have a bitch switch when it comes to like bigotry and erosion of people's rights. Like,
yeah,
and the shitty thing is about that is that in those instances, there's almost this additional level of expectation that you need to have this degree of patience, because otherwise, if you don't approach the person the right way, then basically people will justify you losing your rights, right? if you don't approach them the appropriate way from what an outsider who doesn't have to deal with that being a threat to them perceives as the appropriate way, but does have skin in the game when it comes to things like voting and contributing to the public consciousness. So you're constantly having to weigh, what is enough, and what does it for me is whether or not, I kind of make a personal assessment about whether or not the person is engaging with me in good faith. Like, if somebody's legitimately curious and we can have a conversation about it, and they're just they're asking questions because they want to know the answers to those questions and they want to see my perspective, then I'll usually utilize my patience. If I feel like somebody is having this conversation because they want to be the one that owns Shannon Q on abortion, or they want to be the one who owns Shannon Q on feminist issues, or they want to be the one who owns Shannon Q on LGBTQ rights, I'm not going to give them that sound clip. I'm going to give them a sound clip where I tell them that they're ridiculous. And it's very unequivocally the case that, you're not going to be able to use this to, perch yourself up. Because they do that. Like, Paul and I listened in bed the other night to two dudes that had called into a call-in show to talk about something, and they had a debate back and forth about whether or not either one of them would fuck me. That was just a thing that they did. And I have to just be like, okay, we're going to compartmentalize this. We're just going to eat this, because if I have to if I deal with it the way that I want to deal with it, then I'm potentially going to cede ground that has an impact. Because I'm if you're somebody who's I'm a cis woman who's white. I'm not straight, but I'm a cis woman who's white, who's in a hetero-passing relationship. I have more privileges than a lot of people do, but there's not a lot of atheist women roaming around doing what I do. So that comes with its own set of baggage as well. Because if I don't do a good job, then people can point to me and say that that's the reason that somebody else doesn't deserve a platform. That's the reason that women shouldn't blah, 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 blah. Right. So I don't know. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to traverse. I'm not sure if that was helpful or just a rant.
That is helpful. Very helpful, because I'm a huge fan of both of you guys, and it's just cool to know your thought process. And it was cool learning you guys live together. Everyone was like, "Wow, that's
you guys it always amazes me."
No, yeah, can I sneak in one more random question? It actually has nothing to do with this.
Super quick, sure.
But concerns Paulogia, because I think he's kind of I don't know if you're an expert on this, but I know I've seen some of your videos. But I want to read the Bible because I've never read it, and I don't actually know a lot of the stories. Really, I just know kind of through osmosis, through cultural osmosis, a bunch of the stories. But I know there's tons more. But the fucking King James version is atrocious. It's so hard to read, so much begatting in that fucking book. And I was just wondering if you had kind of a recommendation for a Bible for an atheist to read.
So he's trying to wrangle a dog that's barking at a window right now. He's coming back.
So I'm slightly off frame because I'm petting a puppy at the same time. Yeah. So the question was, was it about what? And I missed a little bit there because my dog is barking. So it was about what version to read?
Yeah, because I really don't like the King James version. It's just I just can't I can barely make it to the 6th day.
Yeah, no. Yeah. So what I would say is it depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to, my goal is often that mixed thing. Like I want the best one that at least attempts to be most accurate to the text, but also, but also be clear. And so it's always difficult when you're translating something, right? Are you translating, like if you're translating from English, it's raining cats and dogs, to another language where they don't use that phrase? You know, are you translating, do you literally translate the words cats and dogs, or do you, anyway, the long story short, I really like the NIV because that's the one that I, as a youth, once I left King James, that was the one I felt was the best thing to do, and I memorized a lot of scripture in NIV. It's called NIV, New International Version. Okay. But the one that seems to be most popular these days among apologists seems to be the ESV, the English Standard Version. I think because they would say the NIV has gone a little bit woke. Because the newer versions of the NIV. So I like NIV.
I don't want the Christian perspective on which Bible I should read, ironically.
Yeah,
I really don't.
But the NIV, what they did is actually they went and they took a lot of the verses that were not gender specific in the Greek, but traditionally have been translated as he, and they kind of went back and changed them to they, and like to more gender neutral language, which is more accurate to the Greek. But okay. Of course, if you're just an English speaking Bible reader, well, the NIV's gone woke about that stuff. So, but ESV seems to be the one. Like Answers in Genesis will usually use ESV, and I think a lot of the big ministries do. So I feel like those are the two ones that do their best to give you a clear meaning of the intention, but also really do try and stick to the best possible sources. Like some of them, like the Message, and some of these others are so loosely translated that they almost don't care about the original. So those are the two I recommend for best balance. I guess that's if that's helpful.
That is very, very helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. Good questions, Rosie. Thank you for calling, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Have a good day. Bye. Bye. I'm always astounded when people find out that we're a couple, and we've been together for like 5 years. That's awesome. That's good though, because it means that we both have individual presences. We're autonomous individuals.
Exactly.
I just thought it was so blatantly obvious, but that's cool. I guess it's not. All right, you ready for another call, dude?
All right. I'm ready. I was just considering whether I should change my channel to Apologia Q or something. Maybe that would help.
Do it right now. Then you can get all of the QAnon questions that I get. It's great. You'll really enjoy it. Let's talk to Jordan. Hello, Jordan. You were on the line. What would you like to talk about today?
Hi, Shannon. Hi, Paul. How you going?
Good.
Doing well.
Nothing. Doing all right, Brad?
That's great. I'm good, thanks. I just wanted to talk about this idea. I'm a former Christian, currently an atheist. So I just wanted to talk about this idea that always pops up when I'm having discussions, and that is with current Christians, that is, and that's that God has the divine right to punish people who fall short of his moral standard.
Okay. I think that I have lots of thoughts about that. Paul, do you want to go?
Well, I guess I'm more wondering what Jordan's thoughts or problems are with that notion.
Good question.
Yeah, so I guess my problems or thoughts around the issue is that, I've unpacked it. And so I think that it's God ultimately set up everything, and yet he set up everything in a way so that, so many millions and thousands of people wouldn't ever come to know what his true word was or whatever, and so would only ever end up being punished by him anyway. So it seems like an immoral thing from the get-go.
So that's only immoral if you are, I guess, defining these things as, as things that you care about, right? Or the things that need respect and all kind of love. Like if there's separate questions about whether it's moral. And of course, our version of moral is like the well-being of humanity and the well-being of people. So we're definitely going to think that harming people is bad, but that's our human-centric version of morality. But when I think about whether God has the right to do things, it's kind of like if I set up a computer simulation as a programmer and I create near sentient beings going around, do I have the right to turn off my machine, or do I have the right to change the conditions, or do I have the right? Like, it kind of feels like there is some inherent rights to do with your creation what you want. Whether or not that's moral is almost the second question. Would you agree with that distinction?
I think that's a better way of framing it, yeah.
Yeah, I would argue that it's not moral, but I structure my morals differently than most Christians would. Like, you almost have to find immoral things moral in specific contexts if you're a Christian in order to attempt the artifice of consistency from a moral perspective, I think. Because there's, from a prescriptivist standpoint, which is what most Christians would be, I would say, which is, God gave us morals. Like, morals are the rules as God dictates them. That is what morals are. And if that is what morals are, then morals could functionally be anything, right? They're just whatever his whims are. So they don't need to adhere to anything that makes sense from a structured standpoint of, like, as we perceive and understand morals to exist. Like, I perceive morals to exist in a framework of first prevention of harm, and then, on top of that, an attempt for flourishing. But at first, like, at very base, prevention of harm would be like the foundation of my moral framework. But God does things that don't adhere to that framework at all, like at the actual fuck all. He harms people all the time. In fact, it's baked into the pie of Christianity that he's going to harm more people than he's going to save by, like, an exponential, like, margin. So harming's not a problem for him. So you have to say things like, well, God's entitled to do whatever he wants. And of course, if you think morals are prescriptive and morals just are what God say, then that fits in that framework. It fits nicely in that framework, but that framework's not a useful framework in any practical sense when you're living your life.
That's a really, really good way of putting it. That's very succinct. Yeah, so I guess following on from that then, sorry, I've just got to get on my thoughts a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, so when I'm talking, thanks. When I'm talking with my family, then it feels very much like, they see it as God dictates, this is right, this is wrong, and they're very comfortable with the idea that, they believe that the new kingdom or whatever will be on the earth, and that, Christ will come back, everyone gets judged. The good people live on eternally, the bad people die. They don't believe in a hell, they just believe they die and just go to the grave. Even still, I think that's not a particularly nice thing, but of course they accept that as being moral and good. So once you already accept that, it becomes all of a sudden, when you read through the Old Testament and you see all of those sorts of, calls to genocide, infanticide, and all sorts of sides, you kind of get used to justifying that in your mind as your rhetoric as a good thing. But I guess or what is a good or effective way when you're trying to talk about this? So we could agree, say, that God has the divine right to do all these things, but then how do you then pivot to framing it from the moral sense as it potentially not being a moral, even if he has the right, potentially not a moral right?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I was just going to say that one of the things that kind of irks me about Christianity, and I don't think it's talked about enough, is that in order to hold the morality of Christianity in the structure that it's presented, it forces you into a position where, in order to believe that the God is good or the moral system is good, you have to dehumanize people on a mass scale. You have to. You just have to, in order to reconcile your gut with it. Right? You have to say, well, those people that they took as slaves, that wasn't really bad. They were saving them from their land. All those babies that were drowned, that wasn't really bad. They were going back to God. All of those firstborn sons of Egypt that were killed, that wasn't really bad. Those people were bad. all of the people that lived in like the Sodom and Gomorrah people that were killed, they were bad people. You have to make unilateral judgments on people groups in order for this moral system to be something that you can adhere to and still call yourself a good person as you know it. So that's kind of an example of how that happens. And that has repercussions on a societal level because you find the people do these mass justifications using dehumanization. And I can hear a dog. Oh, the Bella. So that can happen on a mass societal scale. But my moral framework doesn't have that issue, right? The Christian moral framework does have that issue. It's constantly a game of reconciliation. It's constantly a game of like, you need to assess these people as bad, or you need to assess this thing as good, and you need to find ways to reconcile it with what you know is moral based on understanding of what morality is. And even when they're incongruent, you're constantly harmonizing. Like, it would be exhausting, I would think, to retain that on a consistent level, and it's not practical.
If you want to have that conversation with your family, I think what you need to do is agree to a definition of moral that you both can agree to. So, because otherwise you'll be talking past each other all day long. So if you can get them to agree that morality has something to do with human flourishing and reducing harm, if you can get them to agree that morality includes those things, then you can start to evaluate whether actions are moral. If they just want to insist that morality is whatever God wants to do, then I think you just need to then point out that you are not using the same definition of a word, and so you guys using the same word will never generate overlap of ideas. It's too bad if they won't, but that's the best way to start. Almost with any conversation, coming to agreement on terms is a great way to start. So,
for sure. Otherwise, you're talking past each other. Totally different paradigms existing in the same conversation. So, solid suggestion.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. And yeah, the dehumanizing aspect of it is such a really good point to bring up on that as well, because that was one of the biggest things that was leading when I was unpacking my faith and deconstructing. That was one of the driving forces behind wanting to get out, was I couldn't keep playing that game of constantly reconciling, this is good, this is bad, or whatever, when I found I couldn't really, judge people negatively anymore just on the basis of, ridiculous things according to an old book. So I think that's a really good angle as well.
Well, I'm glad that you had that revelation for yourself and that you're on the journey. Welcome. Welcome to the ranks, I guess.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate your time. You have a good one.
You're welcome, Jordan. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.
You too.
I love a good morality chat.
Absolutely.
Really that was like one of the conversion linchpins for me. Soul and morality were like, once I was like, oh, I don't need this for either of those. Everything else just unraveled at a rapid pace once those two things fell apart for me.
Yeah, whereas for me, it was I had nothing to do with it at all. I didn't come to even worry about how morality. Yeah, so it's just one of those.
Yours was biblical history, like how the Bible was constructed was your thing.
Yeah.
And mine was didn't even matter to me how the Bible was constructed. It was what it said. It's so interesting how different people have different linchpins. Sorry, go ahead, Guy.
All I was going to say was, so I still have no problem with, if God made the universe the way the Bible describes, he can do whatever he wants. Yeah, that's okay. I'll just accept that premise. Yeah. Doesn't bother me.
Yeah. See, well, I guess if you believe it's true, then sure. But it doesn't make sense from any definition of morality that it has any sort of practical use, though. Right. Morality just becomes an inconsistent mess of whatever a guy says according to his whims. For me, it didn't reconcile with the all good, because you couldn't get to a definition of all good. So I had to drop an omni.
That's where we come to figure out that our...
Oh, our dog is having a time. She is having a time today. I just heard her barking again. All right, cool. Are you ready for another call? I've got hair in my mouth. No dog barking. All right. We will talk to... I'm going to have to get her to help me with her name. Hi, Liran? You were on the line. What would you like to talk about today? I'm so sorry. Liran?
Yeah, everyone gets it wrong. Don't worry.
I'm so sorry. What would you like to talk about today?
Yeah, so I was thinking about transhumanistic consciousness, since I know you two are extremely interested in the topic of consciousness. I mean, for religious people, you'd say souls, but yeah. So I was wondering, do you believe that, not currently, but do you believe that with future technology, we could transfer human consciousness outside of the human brain?
I don't know if it's feasible, because I think most of how consciousness emerges has to do with the medium. So I'm not sure what that would look like.
Reckon, the thing is, we could construct, and I'm pretty sure we have constructed artificial neurons.
Mm-hmm. We have. Yep.
Right.
I had a chat with Dr. Mark Soms about it, actually.
Sorry?
We played a game of the Ship of Theseus while he was on my stream, because he was talking about potentially replacing artificial neurons. And my question was, like, at that point in time, like, do we really know how much of you is left? Or are we, like, is the medium, like the actual physical medium of the brain plus electricity? So like the material, the chemicals, well, I suppose chemicals are material, aren't they? And the electricity that comprise the brain, are we sure that medium isn't required for consciousness as it exists and manifests itself right now? Because we could construct something similar, but would it function in the same fashion? I don't know if the answer is yes or no. I just don't think so.
It would be different, because we wouldn't, if we just created the same thing, then hooray, we have more neurons. Like, obviously, if I were, for example, to be transferred into a robot body, I wouldn't, in a robot brain, sorry, I should probably, a robot brain, it wouldn't particularly matter, obviously I wouldn't want it to be the same as a human brain, otherwise what's the point of transferring brains? But I'm thinking, because obviously our neurons have electrical impulses within them, if the if the neuron were to be if our biological neurons were to be extended into an artificial brain, would the fact that those same electrical charges traveled across from one brain to the other, do you think that would keep consciousness, because it would be the same neural patterns and continuous as well?
I'm thinking, because I'm not sure. I think I am hooked up on the medium being a component of the consciousness, and that changing the medium changes the manifestation of that consciousness. So it might be still some form of consciousness. I just don't know if it would be like the same experience. Like, if it would still be whatever an us is. Sure, I'm open to hearing it.
Oh, no, I'm asking, do you believe there would be any way to test whether that is possible? Because I can't think of a way where we construct an artificial network of neurons, and then we're like, hey, can this manifest the same consciousness as human consciousness? Like, how do you reduce that and determine whether a certain neural network is valid?
Well, I thought that you were talking about like us transferring consciousness, like our own consciousness into a machine brain.
Yeah.
Well, the way to test that would be to ask if the experience was similar, I guess, but then you would be operating under the assumption that the new consciousness would be able to articulate that any differences or perceive any differences to be able to articulate them.
Of course. And what I'm saying is, like, obviously in that case, I guess from what you're saying, it would imply that we need to validate the target brain, not really a brain, but the target neural network, before the consciousness can be transferred over.
We would have to know at that point, until, like, if you were just testing if there was any differences, like, it would have to be self-report the same way that like consciousness experiences are self-report now. I don't think there's a
presumably you're transferring over memories at the same time. Like, if you're transferring over memories at the same time, then at least the second consciousness would be able to remember what it was like to be in the biological brain, and then could self-report could self-report the differences based on its memory, as far as memories are reliable. But you're right. I mean, there's obviously a. But
so much our brain is
brain would never know what it's like.
So much of our brain is integrated directly to physiological perceptual abilities too, though, right? Like all of our systems are basically integrated fully on multiple levels into like what we would call senses, like not just the five, like proprioception as well. So you would lose that aspect of it entirely. So I'm not even sure what that would look like, because you wouldn't be able to do some sort of identical map, because there is no perceptual input unless you're just rebuilding a body.
We would lose. I'm sorry.
Like because if you're transferring your mind into like a machine, then there's no integrated perception at that point in time, right? Like you're not like there's no vision in the way that we experience vision. There's no touch in the way we experience touch.
To the brain or to the neural network?
Because that's not the way that we experience vision, right? That's not the way we experience vision. Like we don't, our eyes don't operate like cameras. Our eyes are garbage. Everything we see is upside down, backwards, and full of holes. And then our brain has to reconstruct it. And part of who we are as conscious beings has to do, like, is inherently influenced by our perceptual experiences and how our brain is wired to create our reality around how it interprets those perceptual experiences, right? So the frameworks that exist within the brain right now in order to transmit vision into an experience wouldn't even be that are so integral. Same with like auditory systems that are so integral to how the brain functions and how it integrates into conscious thought, like wouldn't be available unless we were completely whole cloth recreating bodies entirely, right down to like C fibers and nociceptors, in which case we're just creating a human.
I'm concerned. Yeah, but I'm concerned that you're overlooking something here. Like maybe you're not, maybe you're not. Maybe you think it is completely different. But like there are experiments about. I don't know to what extent it is exactly. I think I know, but I could be remembering wrong. Experiments where blind people are given sight, not through their eyes, but through different either neural bypasses or through
same with auditory experiences. Yeah, same with auditory experiences.
Wouldn't that mean we could recreate it?
You could potentially recreate it. Like their vision wouldn't be what we perceive as vision in the same manner, same with sound. But like if we're doing that on a mass scale, like that's a decent point. So I just don't know how the way, like our brains are so integrated towards perception, like towards external perception. If we're creating something where external perception becomes an effortless component, it wouldn't be like, it would probably still be consciousness, I guess. And we're gonna have to go off of this call in a second, because we have like a bunch more calls waiting. and I could do this for hours. But yeah, I don't know. I guess is the answer. Like I have more questions. I'm not just going to affirm it. I'm not just going to say, yeah, sure, absolutely. Because I would have questions. Like I really do think, and then we're also still ignoring that I think the medium might be an important component.
I think the point of that was largely.
Do you know?
I was just gonna say the large, even if you could recreate with cameras, I think the point is that it's creating more new points of failure or new points of differences. Even if the camera may be better or in a way can give roughly the same information, you are still adding points of discrepancy. I guess that was.
And it doesn't always work, and it doesn't work in the same way, right? It's repurposing the systems to like to like trick them almost into thinking that the sensory organs do exist when they don't.
I guess, I was going to ask another thing. What field of study would that be about? I guess, about what whether human consciousness could be transferred to a technological medium.
I don't even know if there's a science like that currently exists, because we don't have the technology to even come close.
Too early? Too early to even start?
Miles. We haven't even mapped the brain entirely yet. to know
True.
exactly what every component of the brain does to transfer it. Like we would need to know what we were transferring first, and we're not even there. So
Yeah, no,
I'm not sure.
We have no idea what consciousness is. Good point.
Exactly.
Yeah, I did have another question, but I understand that I'll have to wait for another
we have
call
several
in the future.
calls waiting. I'm so sorry, but yeah, please call back in the next time I'm on. We can chat again. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.
Sure.
We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
All right, we have several more calls that are waiting on the line. Are you ready for another one, my friend? We'll try to.
I'm ready.
We'll try to power through so that we can take the super chats.
Yep.
I know if our dog is. Don't jinx it. Oh my goodness. All right, let's talk to Andrew. Hey, Andrew, you're on the line. What would you like to talk about today?
Hi, guys. Yes, I'd like to talk about the universe itself. For me, I find it more likely as an explanation that the universe is infinite and created me, rather than trying to find an external sort of explanation for the universe itself being a God outside of the universe that made what we perceive as a universe. I just wanted to talk about that and just say I just find that much more reasonable, much an easier explanation as far as how we're here, rather than just sort of human beings, I guess, coming up with theistic ideas as far as the universe goes.
I tend to more. Well, we know that the universe, as in its current instantiation, had a starting point. So I tend to think that energy is probably the thing that was internal. I, an idiot non-physicist, take that as my position. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I've read up a little bit on that, the energy, but still that would be an origin still to everything, because that still would be something rather than nothing at all. Because of the origin, if before the beginning there was nothing, that's like saying there was no universe and now there is a universe. And you can say that to anything. There's no Santa Claus and now there is a Santa Claus. Santa Claus
I just like to be more precise.
Just the concept or idea of a Santa Claus exists, but literally does not exist. And so then you're just left with nothing because it doesn't exist.
If you're talking with a theist, I like to be more precise than what you just gave me. I think I agree in spirit with everything you said, but when you talk about universe in those ways, it's one of those slush terms that you have to kind of figure out if you mean the same thing. And so I like to use the word cosmos more because it makes people think a little bit more deliberately, meaning that beyond our instantiation of space-time is the cosmos being everything that ever is or ever was, kind of an idea. So that you don't get caught up in whether Big Bang cosmology has anything to do with it at all. And I think your instincts are good in that I agree with you that there's a brute fact. You can't have an infinite regress. And so, if you want to say that God is a brute fact, God is just the uncreated creator. Well, you're just saying infinity lock, I win. So brute fact, if everyone needs a brute fact to terminate the infinite regress. So if you want to say it's God, okay, you can talk about that. And if you want to say it's something material like energy or something like it, which is I think your position, that's great. And I like to use the word eternal rather than infinite because a lot of times theists want to use infinite meaning a sequence of events, like an unending sequence of events. Versus you can kind of get them to think about eternal, because we don't know what before time, is it coherent to have an infinite number of events? And when you talk about, I just like to use these words, not because I think I'm correct in my usage of them, but it kind of disrupts the language enough for the theist and I to have the conversation about what we mean. So that's, I guess, my affirming thoughts.
Right. So in other words, you would say eternal would essentially mean something that would have, let's say energy existed, as an example, before the metaphysical matter came into existence.
And possibly outside of any notion of time. Yeah.
Sure. Space-time. And, okay, so you're saying if it's eternal, then you're saying essentially the energy always existed and it had in a nutshell, had no beginning and no end. But if you're saying it's infinite, you're saying something could have a beginning, but then at that beginning, just never have an end and could just go on forever. But if you're saying eternally, you're saying no, specifically had to have been timeless, and that would mean it had no beginning and also
or at
no
least
end.
allow timelessness. And it also negates the objection about like entropy, right? Like that. Well, the entropy needs time to work. And so, since we don't know what it was like before time, it's equally plausible to think that entropy doesn't apply when there's no time. So these are all just things that I like to use to try to engage with the theist on their terms. So, does that make sense?
And I also, it makes sense to me. I also I don't care if you want to label whatever started the universe God. Like, I don't care. But I think that they use it as a Trojan horse to smuggle in the rest of their theology, because it's something that we both have to say, I don't know to. They label it God. I would label it something different or say, I don't know. And then they just go, well, ha, 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 ha. So that means it was God and also, and also, and also, and also, and also, and also. That's what.
Sure.
That's the only thing.
I'd like to ask you all a question. So what would be the minimal, what to y'all would be a substantiated definition for a God? Like, what is the minimal requirements for y'all to consider something to be God? Because if someone says the energy, if someone were to say, yes, let's say I said, for example, the energy created everything into existence, so created me into existence, and I would say, just by that alone, because I would say that my origin is, even then I would still even call the energy of source, I would still derive that as the universe. I would even call that, and I'll show you the universe, just a matterless universe. But even then, let's say if I were to say that that's my origin, and I'm going to call that leftover, or I should say eternal energy, my creator, and I just were to use a simple definition going on, it's infinite, it has no beginning, has no end, and that created me into existence sometime once the beginning happened for the metaphysical universe as we know it. Would that be sufficient for y'all to consider that God?
Well, I mean,
does it need
energy
to have
already has
energy
already has a description and a definition that's sufficient, right? So, like, you're adding variables to it for your description. Like, I don't know that I would necessarily care, but it doesn't fit any and it also exists in material reality in a measurable way. So if you're just gonna label that God, I just wouldn't care, right? I just wouldn't care. I would be
and my bigger problem
indifferent.
My much bigger problem is that you're using the word create. I don't know why you would use the word create in there at all, because create, like, everything else you said
that
was
means
fine,
intention.
create is intentional.
No,
create is all this thing.
I got what you're saying. You're saying, go ahead, sorry.
Like, we are simply matter reorganized, right? We are matter reorganized. That's not created. That is just, the laws of physics are sufficient to explain pattern or like matter organization, and matter organization is good enough to create chemistry. And chemistry is, biology and chemistry are just on a spectrum. So again, like, if you concede the word create, then just the Ray Comfort's going to jump out of the woods and say, "Gotcha, you're created."
Yeah.
So just don't use that word.
Well, I would say, okay, so for me, if I would say that I actually would, I would use that word, but I would have to minus the other sort of qualities that a creator or a God would have, qualities that a God would have that I think most people's idea of God is. And I would say only that I would still say that origin of mine did, sure, we can say exactly what you said, but in that process of reorganizing matter into organisms and planets and stars, I say that even still that created all of those things that you mentioned. However, it would have to be minus sentience, as you say, minus a thinking agent, and has, with that alone would have no consciousness, would also, as most people's idea I should say most theist idea of God is being omnipotent, so all powerful. So it wouldn't be omnipotent. Wouldn't be omniscient. So
I don't even think we need to go this far. It's just like energy doing what energy does. Like, why do we even need to try to figure out a way to call it God? Why don't we just call it energy and it does what we know it does?
Exactly.
Seems to be a unnecessary addition to me.
If someone were, I'm just saying. I'm just saying if someone were to, I'm using as an example, but anybody, that doesn't have to be anybody, were to say that, just that alone, to say that the energy created me, could they not, just by definition of creator alone, again, I'm not adding all those other definitions, those other requirements underneath what most people's idea of God is, and say that alone could be their God being that.
Like, to what end, though? Like, what?
Yeah.
Why do they even need a God?
We're not in the God-defining business. As an atheist, it's not my job to define what random things might be God.
Right, exactly. I was just going to say something.
Like, I don't even know. I don't even understand the assignment at this point.
No, and I'm not saying that. No, I'm saying there was no intent, no assignment, no intent, no end game, no goal at all to energy. It just had happened that way, but it's still the outcome of that was that it created everything to existence. And I'm just using simplest.
Instead of created, I would maybe use the word like was the origin of.
Right, but it seems like your end game is to want to call you want to call something God at the end of the day, and I'm like, just why? I don't understand why at the end of the day you want to call something God.
I guess for me, to answer that question is because by a very simple one-word definition alone, my origin, well, in my case, I'm using creator, and if I were just to stick, if it is indeed true, and in fact, that the energy did create me into existence, then that alone would be sufficient for me, minus everything else. If none of those other requirements were met or not, doesn't matter to me, and that alone would be suffice to me. But I would know that someone would say, well, what, again, like an argument can be said, like, well, what's the goal? What's the intent? And I would say there isn't a goal and there isn't intent. It just occurred, and there's no the future is uncertain. Like, species go extinct, so we could just be here just for a blink of time, finite existence, and that would be completely the end of the human race as well. So I still would acknowledge that, and I don't think that there's like an afterlife regarding
I mean, you can do you, but like, I don't think that you need to. It doesn't add anything to the concept for you to really need to call that God. Like, it doesn't change anything about the reality of it. It doesn't give you anything additional. So the motivation behind it is I think maybe what Paul and I are getting, but we still have more calls coming in, and we're already like, I'm not even sure if we're going to be able to take them all. So I am so sorry, Andrew, but I am going to have to let you go. But maybe give us a call back in the future, and we can parse out which various things we should and shouldn't call God again at a later date. It's an interesting chat, though. Cool. Thanks.
My call. Yes.
No problem. Thank you for calling in. Have a good rest of the day.
Night.
Thanks. Bye. Yeah, I don't fully get the motivation for that. Like, why not just? Why do we need like an extra level of label?
If it's just a synonym for another thing, like if you're just looking for a thing to make God a synonym of, then yeah, whatever. It's just synonym for a thing that already exists outside of the word. So
you can call a car a vehicle, I suppose, but like, it just doesn't seem like it's necessary, and it's also using God in a way that I don't think anybody practically would use the term. No. But anyway,
yeah. So if your definition of God isn't common with everyone else's, then you're just having your own conversation anyway. So we want to talk to other people. That's why we're taking more calls.
Yes, we are. We want to talk to all the people. We like to talk to Andrew too. Thank you, Andrew. All right, so let's talk to Chris. Hello, Chris. You are on the line. What would you like to talk about today?
Oh, hi.
Hey.
I am like totally new to all this stuff about like deconstructing and all of that. I am an atheist person and just have been for a really long time, although I did go to church and Sunday school when I was a child. But where I live, it's just not an issue at all. And sorry, I was just looking at my TV and it doesn't match with what I'm saying.
It won't.
It won't. Yeah, you might want to.
In fact, you should turn it off, ideally. Oh, did you hang up?
No, she didn't hang up. Our entire show session just ended.
Yeah, I don't know what that was.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Let me try to get that back online.
Yeah, our whole show session just entirely ended. I was interested in talking to Chris, too, because she was calling us two Canadians to talk about if it's different in the U.S., and I wasn't going to...
I was going to congratulate her.
You lived in the U.S., though.
I did. I lived in California, the most secular of the states, according to some. But yeah.
You were super, super duper religious when you were there, though. So your perspective probably wouldn't even...
My faith
you would have been Team Jesus.
San Francisco. That, like... It was weird that my faith survived that, but then it left. I was going to congratulate her on Chris on just living somewhere
now in
where
the host room.
Construction didn't matter.
Cool. Somebody's now in the host room. It's not me though. I should
on dual channel.
See if I can. Paul, be entertaining.
Oh, okay. Well.
Oh, we lost our calls though. It looks like. Boop. Thumbs down.
Uh-oh.
I'm not sure that if somebody could call back in, we probably have time to do one more call if somebody's quick. If not, we can start reading super chats, I suppose, would be the other alternative. Since
we could probably we could read a few. We read the first few until the call stuff comes back. Just
Arden's the boss of us. You'd have to ask her. She's the one who's in charge today. I must bow to Arden. Arden is in charge of me. Arden's the boss of me. Arden says, read a super chat, bitch. Shut the fuck up. It's on screen. Okay. Oh, a power couple tonight. They're talking about us?
I'm hiding under
Matt and Arden are the true power couple. $10 from Beta Channel. You're so weird. Why are you being so weird? Oh, my... Are you going to do that the whole time? Okay, good. You're done. Okay, no. So Beta Channel says, how is there not a regular show on the line called Mind Your P's and Q's with Shannon? Because people will get saturated with us, and whatever you find adorable about us or quirky or interesting will very soon turn to disdain. Because you realize we're only good together in small doses. That's probably why.
Well, I'm only good. I'm only good in very small doses. So.
Can confirm. I can attest to that. That checks out, actually. That absolutely 100%.
But it's a clever title. If we ever do, that's a good title.
Mind Your P's and Q's. Mm-hmm. It would be about that would be fun. Maybe we could do it like twice a year. Just come on. Mm-hmm. Although we're kind of doing it right now. We could just relabel the tag of this show.
We can't replace Happy New Year, so I don't know when we're going to fit it in.
We can't. That's both my favorite and least favorite thing that you and I do together. Once a year, Paul and I get hammered and we watch Ken Ham roam around his stupid fake museum, and I yell a bunch of shit. And we post that, and then Paul posts it on his channel. And I think it's funny sometimes. It's funny, right?
We do. We like it.
Right? It's funny. We have a good time. We have fun. Mm-hmm. All right. $10 from BW Dingus. Shannon and Paul are great. Woo! Hashtag Team Paul. Oh, come on. Coffee tables are the worst. Jamie seems like a nice guy. Bless his heart. I learned when I was in the States that bless his heart is derogatory in America. It is not here in Nova Scotia. Like, if something bad happens to somebody, we go, oh, bless her heart. That means, oh, it's too bad that happened, or oh, we feel bad for that person. In the States, apparently, I found out when I was in Texas and something happened, and I went, oh, bless her heart. And people looked at me like, you're an asshole. I had no idea why. I didn't know what I did wrong. I think Matt might have even been the person that told me, like, you can't do that. You can't say that to people.
But
So
also, I'm not
stopped
sure how
now.
I feel about someone cheering for me in the same message that they think Jimmy's a nice guy. Like now, I don't know what to believe. So
You and Jimmy love
I
each
had
other.
myself muted. Also, Chris is back on the line, so if you guys wanted to take that call, we'll
Ooh.
come back to super chats.
Okay, let's take the call from Chris, because poor Chris. Let's Chris, and then we'll go back to super chats. All right. Here's Chris. Hi, Chris. You are back on the line. I'm so sorry. Our entire system shut down. What would you like to talk about today?
No
Start from
worries.
scratch.
Yeah, I just sort of wonder if I'm in a bubble here in Victoria with religion. It's just not an issue. And I sort of fell into flat earthers a while ago, and from there got through different things, eventually to ACA, the line, etc. And it was all new and interesting to me, the struggle that people in the States have with religion. And I've lived all across Canada, from Labrador to Vancouver and everywhere in between, and never had an issue. So I'm wondering if I'm living in some kind of a bubble.
So everywhere in between? Like, did you live on the prairies at any point?
Yes.
Alberta.
Really?
Winnipeg.
You lived in like Saskatchewan, Manitoba? You lived in Winnipeg and you didn't run into... Okay. Well, you are a lucky person. Let me just say, because Manitoba is very religious in a lot of places. If you lived largely in the cities, you may have escaped it. But like if you want to go out to Steinbeck and Morden and there's a lot of places that are like just really theocentric. Anyway, all that to say, I'm excited for you.
There were places
you've
like
lived
Gimli.
most of your... Yeah. But my experience, I guess, is the opposite of yours. I've lived in a lot of communities where just religion was super, super important. So I guess this just goes to show that anecdotal evidence isn't necessarily great evidence of how things are. But
Well,
I'm kind of like Chris.
Live in areas. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I'm kind of like you. So I live in Nova Scotia.
Go ahead.
So I'm Nova Scotian. I live in Nova Scotia. And I'm kind of like you in that we're pretty secular here in Nova Scotia. Like there's obviously like a decent amount of religious people. I think we're almost like 50-50 with like believers, non-believers in Nova Scotia. Like we're a pretty secular place here. And when I went out to visit Paul in Alberta, I was shocked that there was a publicly funded Christians, like Catholic school system. There's a whole ass Catholic school system. So there's people who have to make a decision. Like they have two choices of school, like the secular school that gets the same amount of public funding as the Catholic school, but the Catholic school gets bolstered by additional funding. So it's the better funded school, but has mandatory prayer and stuff, and is a public school with public funding. So a lot of people will choose to send their children to the... Right. Okay. So, I mean, that doesn't seem like a problem to you? That we have an entire school system in Canada that's a Christian school system that's getting public funding, and then people are making choices to send them to that school because it's better public funding, and then they spend their time forcing children to pray and study their version of the Bible during school.
That totally is a problem to me. But just sort of getting out of religion is what I was sort of having struggled with. It's like when I was a kid, I went to Sunday school, I went to church, I loved it, but I came to realize that, I'm not buying it at a certain age, 11 or 12, and it was just, I don't go to church anymore, and it wasn't an issue. And so when I had lots of religious friends and non-religious friends, and it just wasn't really ever a topic. And so what I'm finding really fascinating is that people are struggling so hard to get away from religion, and that their families, their communities, and so on are so against people making a change, and that just really surprised me.
Okay. So just like individual deconversion, that's going to entirely depend on the denomination that you're deconverting from. I essentially just like ghosted like being an Anglican. Like I faded mostly from my church community, but it's very, very different for Paul, who was a Mennonite. Like leaving his church community was a whole ordeal that like there's still repercussions from. So it's entirely.
There were lots of Mennonites where I lived in Winnipeg, just outside of Winnipeg. There were a lot of Mennonites, and so I can see that where that would be a difficult thing to do. But I just sort of found that there were so many people in so many denominations struggling this hard, and I just haven't run into that with any friends or anything. So I'm just kind of wondering, do I live in a bubble? And the thing you say about schools and that, I've been like a warrior on that for years, but the sort of actual religion itself, I'm baffled by it.
I think a lot of people may be struggling with it and they just aren't articulating it to you too as well. Go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
I think in some senses you are. I think in some senses you are living in a bubble, but you are living in the kind of bubble that most of us in this sphere would like to create all of North America to be a bubble much like you are, where, you know, how you religiously affiliate is not any more important than your favorite type of ice cream or, you know, or, you know, the style of socks you like to wear. Like we would all love to live in a world where it's that unimportant to people. Unfortunately, both in Canada and the US, religion is a major force in everything from politics to interpersonal relationships to marriage relationships to child rearing. So as long as it's so pervasive there, you got a long ways to go. And I'm thrilled for you that none of this ever impacted your life. So that, I mean, I'm envious.
Samesies.
Well, I'm definitely going to pay more attention because I just can't believe I've been in a bubble this long, and all of our friends are majorly non-religious. Some are religious and they do their thing, and we all carry on. And religion just isn't much of a topic.
Well,
I wish that was transmissible to the rest of the world.
That's right.
I'll have to figure out a way to bottle it. But anyways, thank you very much. I just noticed you guys were from Canada, and I thought, geez, how come this has never hit my radar before? And I need to thank the Flat Earthers for that. So I really enjoy your show and all the other ones. And thank you for taking my call.
Not a problem, Chris. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
What I just heard is that Flat Earthers are the gateway to the atheist community on YouTube.
I was just saying, thank you to the Flat Earthers is not a sentence I've heard anyone say before, I don't think.
I know. All right, we have time for one more call, and then we have to speed run it really quick, and then we'll start taking super chats. Because I saw a bunch more come through. I know they start to come through at the end, and I am not Forrest. I don't have the stamina to go for 4.5 or 5 hours or 10 hours, however long he does these things. We will talk to Dan because Dan had called in previously, so he called back in and was waiting. I'm trying to talk to Dan. It won't let me do it. Dan. I did it.
Hello.
Dan, you were on the line. What would you like to talk about today?
I love you guys, first of all. Don't ever split up. You're my favorite couple.
Well, no, if he doesn't start acting right.
Anyhow, what I wanted to talk about was mysticism. And since you're the brain person, I wanted to know if you know of the work of Dr. Andrew Newberg. He's a neuroscientist.
No, I don't think so.
On spirituality.
That doesn't mean that I haven't read his stuff. Can you hear me? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've read studies on spirituality that I am not good with rote memorization of people's names. So that's not to say I haven't been exposed to him, but the name is not familiar to me.
Well, what they were doing, what he and another guy were doing is they were looking into mysticism, and they did MRIs on, nuns praying and Buddhist monks and whatnot. And they were working on the orientation centers of the brain, I guess at the back of the brain. And
what do you mean by orientation? Let's see, occipital lobe. That's visualization center of the brain.
Tells where I end and the rest of the world begins.
Where you end and the rest of the world begin. Well, the back of the brain's the occipital lobe.
What's that?
Yeah, no, like I'm trying, but I'm caught up because you said back of the brain, that's occipital lobe. So I would need to go look at the center that you're talking about. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
Well, evidently there are two orientation centers in the back of the brain that orient you to where you are. Well, anyhow, I did a test and I chanted very passionately. This was about 20 years ago. And all of a sudden, I started feeling connected to absolutely everything, to the oneness of the universe. And I kind of wonder if mystics, say they're a Catholic or a Protestant or whatever, and they decide that feeling that I got, if I'm a Catholic, that's the Catholic God doing it. If I'm a Protestant, it's the Protestant God doing it. But
yeah, I think you're probably right.
So you're not familiar with Andrew Newberg's work and what I'm talking about?
I don't think so. That sounds interesting, though.
My most recent study, my video that I recently did on Are You Going to Heaven, when I was researching efficacy of prayer and like basically, prayer positions versus yoga positions. I'm pretty sure the nun MRI study was in what happened, and basically the study leveled out that they got the same results whether it was a nun praying prayerfully for their prayer versus like a yoga instructor doing their meditation result. They got basically the same MRI results no matter what. Just being intentional was really what generated the same neurochemical responses. Is that roughly the study that you're thinking of?
Well, I don't know if it's the
or
same
are you hypothesizing that maybe
like it's in the same ballpark?
Yeah, the one I found is by Mario Beauregard. That's all. I'd have to go look up the other.
But
and they're talking about the visual cortex in this study. So this study sounds like it might be what you're talking about. Well, this study. Well, this is what I was getting caught. This is what I was getting caught up on. I think this might be the study. I wonder if it's the same study, or at least it's similar work. Like the main goal from the MRI was to identify the neural correlates of a mystical experience. The brain activity of Carmelite nuns was measured while they were subjectively in a state of union with God. And this state was associated with significant loci of activation in the right medial orbitofrontal cortex, which is like, you can't really, it's up here. You're gonna go through your chin to get to it. And the right medial and the right middle temporal cortex, which would have a little bit to do. The right inferior and superior parietal lobules, that would have to do with proprioception. So that would make sense. The right caudate, the left medial prefrontal cortex was to do with conscious experience, like processing. Singular cortex. So it was lots of brain areas, including the brainstem and the occipital visual cortex, which would be the back of the brain. So it looks like they tested a bunch of different stuff in this one. Maybe it's a different one. So, I mean, it's interesting to me, I guess, to a certain degree, but like it's not surprising to me that you can activate something that we would label as a spiritual experience through controlled breathing, removing of external perceptual distractions and like utilizing like repetitive types of chants or like repetitive motions. Like that's just part of the human experience because you can utilize your body in all kinds of different ways to release neurochemicals, right? Like you can utilize your body, like having sex is utilizing your body to release a bunch of neurochemicals. That gives you an objectively different state of experience than not having sex. Like you can do all kinds of things with your body that cause enhanced or just differing neurological.
One thing that was interesting is that when I did this test, even when I wasn't chanting, I usually chanted every evening. And when I wasn't chanting, even the whole next day or the whole next couple of days, I still had that wonderful feeling of connectedness that I had never experienced. And I'm wondering if combination of wishful thinking about wanting an afterlife and a God, and this feeling that you get when you disconnect that part of the brain, if those two things are why we're saddled with religion.
Oh, I think there's way more variables than that are why we're saddled with religion.
Oh, yeah, sure. No,
they go all the way down to macro and micro. There's all kinds of reasons.
And I'm a lifelong atheist. I'm 76.
Oh, wow.
When I was a child of about 9, I remember being under my bed because my violent stepfather was beating the hell out of my mother, and she was screaming. And I'm under the bed, and I'm crying, and I'm begging God to make it stop. That was the beginning of my deconstruction. And then when I was 18, I read the Bible cover to cover, and I said, if this God exists, he's a monster, and I'm in the front ranks of his enemies.
Well, we all get there different ways, and I'm so sorry that you had that experience. And I'm so glad that you're here to chat with us now, but I'm afraid we do have to let you go because we are approaching the end of the show. But I'm thankful that we got to take your call. And I hope you have a good rest of your day, Dan. Thanks for calling.
I'm so glad to talk to you guys. I love you. I watch you all the time.
Oh, well, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dan. Appreciate that.
And remember have a good rest of your day. Said, you have to stay together forever, or you will deeply.
Remember what I said. You better act right. See you later, Dan. Have a good day.
Love you guys.
Bye. Love you too, Dan.
Bye-bye.
What a sweet man.
When I got my cancer diagnosis shortly after deconverting, I literally had to go out and find myself chants to replace the prayers that I used to say. So I actually turned to, in Dune, the Bene Gesserit have a litany against fear, and I printed that out and put it on my wall because I needed to. And it did. It very much gave me almost the same test as Dan. It gave me much the same calmness, the same kind of focus, and it was just like a little bit of a timeout. But it almost didn't matter. I think that's probably why it works to chant these things in Latin for some people, because the words aren't specifically important as the intentionality. So yeah, I affirm. I affirm that.
Because if you're hyper focused on that, if you're vigilantly focused on that, it takes out external variables, external perceptual variables, but it also takes internal perception of your internal monologue and thoughts pertaining to things that may be stressing you out or you may be concerned about. If you would focus in specifically on doing that thing repetitively, then you can alleviate some of that.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. It's super chat o'clock. We will read all super chats, $5 or more, up until I fall asleep.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna
make it. All right. I laid off on the coffee table for a bit because we got new bed set. So I'm giving you a minute to recover from that furniture. Awesome. That was even your idea, FYI. You're the one that said tomorrow we should go out and get a bed set.
It was my idea, yeah.
Yeah, it was your idea, and I think it was partially to distract me from the coffee table, but that's fine. that's fine. We'll see. It'll sate me momentarily. We'll see.
Well, hopefully there's no clutter on the bed.
There's no clutter on the bed. There's nothing in the bedroom. There's nothing on our walls. We live in a warehouse with a couch in it, and you're in your Macintosh computer, and that's it. And the one chair, and my grandmother's one chair that I got refurbished, and that one antique table that I got refurbished. That's it. Anywho, we have to stay together, or we're gonna upset Dan.
All right, yeah, we have for Dan.
Let's not break up right now on the air. All right, Jesus was supposed to have been a carpenter. Oh, and $5 from Mark Fernkopf. Sorry, I forgot to read that. Jesus was supposed to have been a carpenter. Is he purported to have made any coffee?
This is why I said the thing. You're reading it, not me.
Did they inevitably become consumed by clutter? What do you think, Paul? Did Jesus make any coffee tables?
Probably because he was a troublemaker. He was clearly unconcerned about.
He was unconcerned about clutter.
Mm-hmm.
He told everybody to sell their possessions. So I don't think that he clearly didn't like clutter. He wanted it all out of his little cult of people that followed him around the countryside to tell people to sell their things and follow him.
Anyway, this is very clever, Mark. I appreciate that.
Clean.
Today I learned from Sean McDowell that Jesus was probably middle class. I'm like, okay, that's a whole thing I need to examine sometime.
Is that even concept, like a socioeconomic concept that you can apply to that time period?
I think that the first century, no, anyone under Roman rule had a middle class, but
he's gone off the rails a bit lately. I watched him the other day. I can't remember what it. Maybe it was on the show that you just did the video on, where he was like, Jesus totally would have passed the Me Too movement, like it was a test.
Yes,
you got off the rails, Sean. What? Could you repeat that slowly for me, please? Because did you just say Jesus would have passed the Me Too movement?
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty then. Fair enough. $5. Maybe he would have. Maybe he would have passed the Me Too movement. $5 from James Call. You can read the next one. If Jesus was a carpenter and Jimmy, go fuck yourself, by the way, is a carpenter, would a Jimmy-made coffee table be welcomed in your home?
Well, I don't see how Jesus being a carpenter is relevant here. No, a Jimmy-made one. I mean, a Jimmy-made one would be interesting, but no. It's still going to collect clutter. It doesn't matter who made it.
I don't see a world where a coffee table comes into this house unless miracles do in fact happen.
Unless you made a
coffee
table.
I'll give you that. But art's, I'm going to put some art on the walls, though. We talked about that. We both have to agree on it. I get that.
If Jimmy could make a coffee table that would literally repel anything put on it, but then you probably don't. If you can literally never put anything on it, then there's no point. So
just a coffee table with a force field.
Yeah.
You try to put a glass on it, it just shoots it into the ceiling.
Boing.
I would get that coffee table tomorrow. It's your turn. You go. Go.
All right. $5 from RPG Debunks. If you could transfer consciousness, how could you objectively prove that consciousness was that of the person whose consciousness you transferred?
That's what I don't know if you can.
You'd have to have access. So if transfer means like a one way as opposed to a copy, then I don't think you ever could. If you made a copy of someone, you could do some tests. You could interview the original owner of the consciousness and then the new owner of the consciousness, the cloned consciousness. You could, and then if you got to some level, perhaps you could be reasonable in saying that it was transferred. But yeah, if it's literally a one way, then it's just blind. Yeah, who would know? Good point.
No, it seems like a philosophical zombie experiment to me. Like, I'm not sure that you could even know it was entirely. I don't know how you prove you're conscious.
Well, and it's a bit like the transporter problem, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure.
So,
I mean, it's an interesting thought experiment, but makes you think about consciousness. All right, $10 from Jeff Edwards. Thanks to both of you. Your channels have been so helpful during deconstruction. Thank you for watching our channels. We appreciate you. In appreciation, I won't even mention common area-based furniture of a four-legged variety or its necessity.
You're my new favorite, Jeff Edwards. Thank you. At least until the next super chat.
It haunts your dreams. I love how many people are on my team about this, though. That just objectively makes me feel good about myself. For all the times you made me mad. Your turn. We're going to switch.
$20 from Logan Fisher. Where do I draw the line with my family? I hate them for being so cruel and not letting me experience life, homeschooled / fundamentalist upbringing, but I love them as a family. Do I owe them? Should I be the bigger person? Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, you're probably the better person to answer, like experientially.
So, first of all, you do not owe them. I think the first question I would ask anyone asking even anywhere close to this line of questioning is, are you still financially reliant on that family? Like, do you still live with them? Are you independent of them? Because it's a different answer if you are still in a position of dependence, because then you do need to find a way to coexist in that way. I think you are not obligated to stay in a toxic relationship for any reason. So if there are certain boundaries that you want respected, and you should think about that. And if you expressed what those boundaries are and they're not being willing to maintain those, then I would say it's not worth it. But if you still love them and still want to maintain a relationship, there are ways to do that. You're able to agree to not talk about certain things. And frankly, both parties have to respect this relationship in those ways, right? If you set boundaries and they respect it, that means that both parties are coming at this and finding ways to coexist. If either you or the other party are not willing to, then forcing it is probably more harmful than good. That's my short version, Shannon. I don't know if you would add to that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you touched on like that you don't owe anybody a relationship ever, no matter what they did for you at all. Period. Full stop. The end. It's a matter of whether or not you want the relationship. Like, so first you need to assess whether or not you want the relationship. If it is a relationship that you want, then I would agree with Paul. The best thing that you can do is do boundary setting, because that will level set for you. It'll tell you some things too. It'll tell you whether or not they're willing to respect your boundaries as you articulate your boundaries to them. And sometimes it takes a bit, especially if somebody's used to trampling all over your boundaries or not even recognizing that you might even have them. It might take them a bit to acclimatize. So like if you really want that relationship, you're going to have to be patient and continue to do that level setting. But that'll usually like establish a framework where you're focusing on the aspects of your relationship that are positive instead of the negative. But if there's things that you need to reconcile, like you feel as though like there's things that they have done to you in the past or things that impacted you detrimentally in the past that you feel like you need to reconcile with them, I always recommend attempting to do some form of therapy, like getting a third party involved, because those things can escalate quickly if you don't figure out how to deal with that baggage. So I think that's an important part too. It depends on how much baggage is there that needs to be reconciled, because you also owe it to yourself to not just ignore pain for the sake of maintaining a relationship like they didn't even hurt you. Like that's not a fair thing for anybody to be expected to carry. Like if you need to reconcile it, it's a complex issue. So if you can seek external help, secular therapy project's great for that. If you need somebody to talk to.
I think that is that forgiveness is not necessarily a virtue. Like that you don't owe anyone forgiveness. If you choose to forgive for your own reasons, great. But it comes up in a lot of these religious things. You just need to forgive us for the things we did. You don't owe them that. That's foreign to Christian concepts as well. But yeah, you don't.
Yeah, because I see forgiveness as a virtue, and they constantly say things like, well, forgiveness is what will set you free. No, not necessarily, because it depends on what your perception of that forgiveness is, whether or not the people are deserving of it, and whether or not it is going to benefit you. Because sometimes if you're forced into a position to forgive people, it's almost like saying that you give them permission to have hurt you, and that now the onus is on you to have to move on because you've relinquished their responsibility, and that's not healthy if they haven't taken that accountability.
Right, exactly.
I don't think. Yeah, so that's our very long-winded answer that I'm hoping is at least somewhat helpful.
All our best, Logan.
Yeah. $10 from Norp Florbson. Norp Florbson?
The G is silent, I think. Norp.
The G is silent. You're making an executive decision on that one, are you? In the word Norp? All right, so are there scenarios where faith, and hyper-rationality is ineffective? Am I reading that incorrectly? Faith, and hyper-rationality is ineffective. For instance, in art, invention, motivation, in arbitrary waters, don't gut and hunch become necessary at time due to time pressure? I'm going to need you to explain that to me, because for my dyslexic ass, that was a lot to process.
Sure,
mentally.
yeah. So are there scenarios where faith, and hyper-rational? Let me look at the second piece here. For instance, in art, invention, motivation, arbitrary, don't gut and hunch become necessary at time due. Boy, this one's a little bit too compressed. So is intuition? I guess there are times when intuition is a tool, but I think what we often say is intuition is really just a heuristic to reach a conclusion in ways that we've just become used to. We've become used to making a decision. For example, someone who looks friendly, because we've seen so many people who look friendly acting friendly, that our heuristic becomes that someone looks friendly. Our instinct says that they're going to be friendly, or if someone's acting a little bit off, and so I guess, I guess it depends on your definition of faith here, and you're throwing in a lot of words that have these soft definitions, like motivation and like in art, like not everything is about syllogisms, if that's what we're trying to say. I don't know, Shannon. I think I'm maybe Norp can clarify for us. I didn't quite understand.
Yeah, I don't think that hyper rationality is the way to go. To what you're saying, like we all kind of have to operate on hunches from time to time. It's usually because we've encountered a set of like perceptual components that haven't had an exception. So we kind of
We also
that they're going to continue to be consistent.
A lot of times where this becomes useful is when we're in scenarios where we have only partial information. Like that is where when we're in scenarios when we don't have the complete picture, that is often where we end up being creative, or we end up relying on previous experience and applying it in a new way. Like it's like when people are trying to create art or invent something, like if you're trying to invent something that's never existed yet, well, then you are dealing with a lot of unknowns, and you have to fill in unknowns with gaps. And some people are better at filling that in than not. But those are definitely places where you're outside of rationality because you have only incomplete data. So like those are the cases I think that you're describing with art, motivation, those kind of things, where innovation happens. You're right, it's not purely rational, it's being what we label as creative. But yeah
okay, I think we got it. I think so.
Yeah.
All right, $10 from
10
Faye.
British pounds from Faye. Paul, I saw your video where someone said that you should accept the whole Bible as true or treat it all as false. Have any other Christians agreed that this is how history should be done? Hashtag coffee table. So many Christians, including today, I have had another apologist affirm with me personally that that the Bible is, and this is the kind of Christian I was, that the Bible is 100% true, and if it's only 99% true, then you may as well throw it in the garbage. A lot of Christians are that way. What I will, so absolutely, many Christians, including myself, were there. So that is some of the baggage that I was bringing to that conversation, was former me, who felt that that's a fine and defensible position to make, because that's a lot of evangelicals feel that way. Jonathan, who is the person who I was speaking of, and and that time, he and I actually, I'm going to do a video on this at some point. He and I actually had a conversation this last weekend, and his nuance is different from that. In ways that it's a distinction that I feel is without a difference, and ultimately I feel like it does actually boil down to this still, generally, despite the nuance parsing and phrasing of it. But no, lots of Christians think that the Bible is what they call inerrant, and that if you could disprove one single fact, they would throw it in the garbage. So that's pretty common, at least in my old circles.
Yeah, for the record, Jonathan isn't an inerrantist, though. But I get what you're saying. It's a distinction without a difference. We've had 7,000 conversations about this over the course of the past week and a half. Because, the way he laid it out in that debate that you and he had was, he said, when you're analyzing something, you have three choices. sometimes 4. And those 3 choices were, when it comes to eyewitness testimony, it was either true, they're mistaken, they're lying, or some combination of the 3. But then he kept saying trilemma over and over and over again. Because he said, sometimes it's some combination of the 3, almost like it was a throwaway comment, and then just said trilemma over and over and over again, referring to the first 3 that I mentioned. And the first one, if it's true, then that means you're assessing the entire thing as true. The next 2 mean it's false definitionally, because either you're mistaken or you're lying. Those mean it's false, which means that you are only left with 2 binary choices. And then he said he didn't want to go pericope by pericope. He wanted to assess the entire document. So it seems like, from a communication standpoint, he wanted to have it both ways. He wanted to be able to say, well, it's either you have to analyze the entire document using this trilemma, and since he kept saying trilemma, it's just those 3, and it didn't seem to acknowledge the 4th one, even though the 4th one is, in fact, I believe the position he holds, is that it's some combination of mistaken lies. He might not say lies, but mistaken and truth, and he would weigh it more heavily on truth. That's just not the way he was communicating it, I think. I don't know, maybe...
I don't want to be off the cuff about it at this point, but
that's fair,
suffice to say, no, because I don't want to misrepresent. No, because nothing we're saying here should be attributed to Jonathan. These are, yeah.
No, this is my perception of what he was communicating.
Yeah. So, but to answer your question, I do know a lot of Christians who do think exactly that. So.
Oh yeah, 100%. You were one of them back in the day.
I was.
From Larry Fishman, here's my contribution to the coffee table fund. The 2 of you should do at least monthly shows. I don't know if we could pull off monthly, but we could do a couple times a year for sure. But no, Christians barely called us except for Rocky, and he bailed as soon as we started talking.
That's right. Yeah.
We need Christians to call. I would love it if more Christians would call it.
All right, $10 from Von Min 729. Thank you, Von Min. Can you talk about the difference between atheism and a Gnostic atheist? I saw Shannon talk about atheism in a clip, and it resonated with me. I'd love to know more. Love the show. Sounds like it's for you.
Yeah, okay, so I, by no means a philosopher, but atheism kind of resonates with me because it's essentially saying, like, every concept of God that I've been presented with seems like nonsense to me. Like, it seems to fall apart under scrutiny to the point that saying I believe in God is like saying I believe in blah, 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 blah. Like, none of them seem coherent to me. So there isn't a definition of God that I've encountered that I even disbelieve because I don't think that they're coherent. And I think, like, if you're a Gnostic atheist, you think there's a coherent definition, at least as I understand it. That's not a term I would use probably, but I think the way that it's being used here is like an atheist who feels like they know there is no God. I feel like you would maybe point to a definition and say, okay, well, this definition is coherent, but for this list of reasons, I don't believe in that God. I don't think the definitions actually even get to the point of being coherent. And that would be the differentiation between the 2. Paul would be not either of those, I would think. I don't think so.
Well, it depends. You would. My stance on what label I give varies for each definition of God. For each definition of God, I would say I carry a different position. That's part of the problem. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whereas atheism kind of encapsulates my stance on all of them. So I think that they all fall apart under scrutiny, which is why I don't believe any of them, because they boil down to nonsense. All right. So $9.99 from Nuzzy D. Love y'all. $19.99. What did I say?
9.
Did I say something? Oh, sorry. Dyslexics love being corrected.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry. I wanted to give credit to Nuzzy D.
No, you're fair. That's fair. Love y'all. As a secular parent, do you recommend any resources, books, TV, etc. for parents, children? I feel the lure to return to Reform Judaism's humanism in the Kippah, but I reject the politics thoughts. Thank you. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy. I don't know of any secular parenting books. Somebody should write one. I mean, there's lots of parenting books that don't have a religious bent. Like, so any, parenting book that's founded on, actual verifiable, like research, like fact-based science, would be definitionally secular. And that's where I would go. I don't know if you're looking for something that says, hey, you are an atheist specifically. How do you navigate parenting a child? I don't know if that book exists. If it does, I'd be interested in hearing about it too. Put it in the comments. I'll go read them. Maybe I'll find a new book.
So the one I would recommend, since you're willing to go with TV, and this is a little bit weird, but I definitely have recommended for, is Any Incarnation of Scooby-Doo. Because every episode of Scooby-Doo involves someone trying to scare somebody with some supernatural thing, and every single time they slowly weed it away and they figure out that, oh, this wasn't a ghost, or it wasn't werewolves or whatever. Like, every single time they put together the clues and say, well, okay, what fits all the data? And in the end, they pull the mask off, and it wasn't that thing. Like, actually, it's really, despite all the silly wrappings and trappings around it, it actually really is a good guide to how to be a skeptic. So that's one you can get into.
Cool.
$5 from Richmond Dies. What is oneness with the universe and connectedness? Can one of you help me with this? Wow.
I think it's just a label that you give to a specific set of feelings because you don't have the language to describe what it actually entails.
It's my understanding that there's certain types of hallucinogens that can make people feel that in a particular kind of way. I have no experience with those kind of things, and I've never really felt a oneness with the universe. But yeah, and it's generally just random not random, but it falls in the category of attribution error as far as I'm concerned. So.
Yeah, and I think that's the language that people use when they have those types of experiences. So you're primed to utilize that language when it does occur.
Yeah.
Like, that's
right,
just, par for the course when that happens. Mm-hmm.
If I took a hallucinogen, I will have heard that people describing it that way so often. You're right. I am primed now. Yeah. To
have that perception.
Interesting.
Which could be a component of the experience too.
Right.
All right. $10 from Game Master Flash. Love both of you. We love you too. I always learn so much every time either of you are on a show. Thank you. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy.
And double check, because sometimes we need to be double checked. So
yes, absolutely. Never take anything I say at face value. Look it up.
Yep. $10 from Zachary. $10 from Zachary Loner. Can Jimmy make a coffee table with a force field so strong that he can't put anything on it? That's the question. That would be an interesting experiment that we would want. That's what we want to know. Get on that, Jimmy.
He's got nothing to do. He's just sitting around. $5 from Eddie Dean. Paul, the youngster who interviewed Sean, needs saving from those apologists. Hope he watches your vids or even reaches out to you for an interview. I don't know that Nahoa needs saving. I think he's a keen young fella.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I think he's a super keen young man.
He's asking, either he will leave his faith because the answers he's getting are not satisfactory, which it seems like, given his counter questions, they are not fully satisfactory for him. Or he will have an informed faith, which I am also okay with. Like, what I feel like a lot of the problem comes from masses who don't think about this stuff deeply and kind of are therefore susceptible to being led maybe where they shouldn't go. So anyway, I think Nahoa, I wish that my young teen years had been as skeptical as Nahoa's were. And I feel like, he's going to land in a place that I would feel okay with either way.
Yeah, I think he is a keen young fella. And also he's just a young kid. Like, I wouldn't want anybody to focus on him too much. He's a fantastic, and like his game when it comes to I'm envious. Like I could not even. The only reason my channel looks like anything at all is because you're an embarrassment. Please let me help you. That's the only reason.
But we're probably going to see but the one thing he does have is he's able to get the good guests.
Oh, for sure.
So so you're probably going to see more of him on my channel, mainly because he's getting the adults who don't admit things elsewhere. So it's cool.
Oh, that's true. Letting their guard down for him. $10 from Mirror on the Wall. Just want to say you are both amazing. Thank you. Paul came across your channel from a GM Skeptic vid, and my husband and I binged all your videos. You had a huge impact on our deconversion. Thank you so much. Oh, look at you.
Thank you so much, Mirror on the Wall.
You did it good.
Well, I'm glad you found your path out of the maze, as it were. So, yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed.
$50 from Too Young to Feel This Old. Wow. Consciousness transferring solve equals just do what the Kaminoans did with the FET clones. Copy paste the brain and let the brains be their own people. Then let them figure out what the heck they will do with their blue milk at a coffee table. Yes.
I feel like this is inside baseball for you.
Mm-hmm. It is. So interestingly, what the Kaminoans did with FET was, you notice even in Attack of the Clones, Boba had to be an unaltered clone, right? All the rest of them were altered clones. Boba was the specifically unaltered, non-hyper-aged one, and the other ones had things like Order 66, like implanted in their brains, and specific orders like they couldn't hurt Palpatine. Like they were actually heavily modified in the consciousness transferring for the clones. So really only Boba was the only one that was purely a consciousness transfer. And even then he ended up a little bit less centered than he spent a lot of his life less centered than his dad because, of course, heredity and environment always play a factor. But yeah, that's what I think about that. Star Wars stuff.
Said words.
But
blue milk, those are all words you said.
Blue milk is always funny.
Yep, I don't know what that means either.
It's what
Does
they
blue
drink
milk
in Star
come
Wars.
out of that big? Oh, okay, fair enough. $4.99 from Nuzzy D. I'm only a simple cishet married with kid. Do what brings peace to the home. Get the faux king coffee table. Then do what you want. Sorry, Paulgia. We're not getting a coffee table. Don't worry. We're not going to get a coffee table. You're safe. Your space
$10
is safe.
from Too Young to Feel This Old. So I'm getting into 3D printing Mandalorian helmets / armor. Would Paul like to have one painted to match the Paulogia channel? If so, how would I get it to you? Well, that does sound cool. Paul at paulogia.com. And yeah, maybe.
So you can have a helmet painted all different colors.
I got
shipped to our house.
These are props. You have props behind you. I don't complain about those. It's not clutter.
Books and like very little decorative crap. For the one who doesn't like clutter, I have a shelf that I specifically decorated with very minimalistic stuff. There's a Bible there. You have a shelf underneath your TV that is literally all just teeny tiny toys.
But you know that those are all functional because what breaks sound waves better than anything is non-book stuff on shelves. That is why this exists as sound treatment for this room. It is.
It didn't come here to this house and bought. Okay. 55. Thank you, Paula G. White. Thank you so much for your $55 in Canadian money. Thank you very, very much. Just got here. Damn. Go Canadians, eh? People should check out hypnagogic hallucinations. I think that's maybe hypnagogic hallucinations and see how real they can feel. I get them all the time. I thought people might even have been talking about visions when I first came into this. Oh, interesting. I will have to look that up. That sounds familiar to me, but I can't place why hypnagogic would.
And it's no surprise that, of course, because every idea under the sun about Christianity has been put forth, but there's it's not uncommon to hear that, perhaps the Jesus and his disciples might have been into some kind of hallucinogens. That's been proposed. I don't hold to it, but it wouldn't be the first time.
Apparently, hypnagogic hallucinations are ones that you experience as you're about to fall asleep.
Oh, cool. That's why I've heard of it before. Doing REM cycle research. Yes, cool. Very neat. Cool. I will look into it more. $10.
Right. $10.
Oh, your turn. Sorry. Let's try.
$10 from Taishi Kojima, maybe? Anyway, Shannon, do you have any thoughts on overstimulation as a trigger for anxiety? Is there research on mental productivity with or without a giant pile of clutter in the center of a workspace? Just kidding. And now, yeah.
It's demonstrably the case. I don't know if I could point to a specific research study that the less clutter you have around you, the less likely you are to have anxiety. It's not specifically related to the existence of the clutter. It's related to the perception that that clutter is going to equal work. Like the clutter represents a future task that needs to take place, which is why people with attention deficit disorders can get overwhelmed, because that's another future task that you need to add to your organizational schematic that you're laying out for yourself for the rest of the day, because people with ADHD become hyper focused on laying out all of the tasks that they need to do in order to be able to focus on them, and that task itself becomes so overwhelming that you're attempting to organize mentally that the more things that get added to the list, the more something's bound to drop, and then you blame yourself for that thing dropping, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So clutter around you can represent that future task that needs to take place. And then it can become overwhelming and induce anxiety in a subset of cases. Some people, there's a range of neurodiversity though, right? So some people are not bothered at all by their surroundings, really. I'm not one of those people. I'm like Paul in that I need everything to be at least visually out of my sight. Whether or not it's organized where it is a different story, but I need to not see it when I'm in the room, because otherwise I will have anxiety and get overwhelmed. So my rooms tend to look very sparse, and my closets tend to not look very sparse.
But from my software development days, even clutter is opportunities for distraction as well. So when you're talking about pure productivity, when you're creating applications that are designed specifically to be productive, you actually literally just want to hide as much as possible, because every button, everything on screen is a potential distraction from the task you're at. And that's actually why they recommend now for writing that you get yourself an iPad and literally don't put any other app on it. For example, or that's why they felt like typewriters were actually better, because you could just single focused one purpose on the typewriter. So.
Because the instrument was specifically designed for just that one task, so you're
Correct.
not able to use that
space,
that area, that tool for anything else.
Right, then there's no alerts or no anything else. Yeah. So.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I like that thought. $5 from Eddie Dean. Thank you, Eddie, for your $5. Apologia, when's your next live stream? For some reason, your live channel doesn't send me notifications. Also, shout out to Mel's Hall. This guy knows what's up. This guy watches you and Dave. Also, just
Eddie's
before
you
start. Yes, Eddie. The same thing happened to me. I wasn't getting notifications for either of his channels, and it was really annoying. And I went, and YouTube had changed the notifications on me. I had to go in, click on the bell. It looked like it was set up to notify me. I had all alerts set on. But then when I went in, I even sent Paul a screen capture of it. Even though it looked like notify me for all, the check mark was next to personalized, and I hadn't set up a personalized notification, so it wasn't sending me notifications. So I now had to go click the bell that said all notifications and make sure the check mark was next to it also on my phone. I don't know if it looks different on the computer. And now I get the notifications, because YouTube does some messed up shit with that stupid notification bell. I don't know why it can't just be off or on, and I didn't do anything to it. At one point in time, YouTube turned off my notifications for Paul's channel entirely. Anyway, that answers your bell question, probably. Go, Paul. You may now speak about your channel, since the question was addressed to you.
So I think this is the last time I will be live streaming this month, probably, because I have personal travel stuff happening. So yeah, so I think this might be the last time. So no Toast to Toast this Friday, but maybe the Friday after, which would be like May 4th or 5th, something in there. So yeah.
Oh yeah, you and Dave can do that while I'm away for Girls Weekend. You guys can have a party. $5 from Jamie J. Thank you, Jamie. Okay, but why not a small end table? The end table actually wouldn't work because our couch is L-shaped. So the end table wouldn't work because it would be like so far away, and I sit in the middle of it.
Would the end table have a force field that also wouldn't let you set anything on it?
So what I'm hearing is if we get a table with a force field, then I can have a table, so long as it has a force field.
Well, no, then it's just something
negates the use of it.
Then it's just something to bump into. So I would lose. It would lose the point. But
I can't imagine what it would be like to kick over a computer or a cup or.
You're the one walking around
on the floor, like I live here and have to walk sometimes. Like, the absolute temerity that this woman has.
I'm just saying, there's another path.
She can walk from the living room to the kitchen and not put her feet in a coffee.
I think that means we're done super chats.
Yes, that was the last super chat.
Well, thank you very much for being here, Paul. I feel like this has really enhanced our relationship, and
No, I'm not so sure that I'm net positive on this one, but we'll see.
I would like to thank the moderators in the live chat. Thank you so much to all the moderators. I see you. I got Cookies doing all of the hard work. We love you very, very, very much. Thank you for all the work. And I would like to thank the call screener. And today, I believe, I didn't get a chance to write it down.
Was
Tempest. It Zoe? It's Tempest. Okay, thank you, Tempest. So much for being the call screener today. And thanks for Paul, I guess, or whatever. Paul, where can people find you, and what do you do, or whatever?
So I have 2 channels. I have on YouTube, Paulogia and Paulogia Live. If you are a glutton for punishment, you can also follow us on Twitter, but I don't recommend it. A platform. If you're going to be on Twitter, you should definitely follow us. But if you can just avoid Twitter, you're better off.
Yeah, but if you're not on Twitter, don't get it just to do that. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do it. All right, cool. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. And just a reminder that, we have a Patreon if you would like to support this channel and everything that we do and all of the great creators that are on the line on all of the various channels providing all of this free entertainment to you. You can support us on Patreon, and when the show ends, you will see the name of the top tier patrons and the Patreon credit producers that will scroll across the screen. And as always, everybody, elevate the discourse. Bye. Wait really hard. It'll come. Oh, it's still on. Let's admire them. Look at them. There they are. Admire them for helping. Thank you for helping, guys. Patreon.com. Call the line.